Hey up lads and lasses, Damphyre here, back again with some more Infinite Lagrange. Sorry this video is a little bit late this week, normally releasing Infinite Lagrange stuff on Thursdays, but I was away having fun for once instead. No, I was just taking a bit of a break and I got back later on Thursday than I was expecting and I just didn't have time, so I've been doing this morning on Friday and releasing it probably tonight, this evening or something like that. So anyway, I wanted to go through the flagship skills. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to rank them in a tier list. I've had a good bit of time now to play around with a lot of these, and I don't believe I've actually done a tier list on flagship skills. And some of them are quite important. Some of it doesn't matter at all. You'll find like quite a lot of the time like one or two are being like used quite like considerably more than literally all the rest, and there is good reason for that. One, fleet design at the current moment kind of situates the sort of style of flagship that you're going to be running, and swarm being still very prevalent fleet style, and obviously your only other sort of option there would be the super heavy fleet style, which obviously you can't really run until you're like a vet player, because you just don't have the tech points at the end of the day. You might have an ST-59, you might have the spear, but unless you've got 200 tech points and a couple of the systems for it, it's just gonna die very, very damn quickly, regardless of what you do. So yeah, that super heavy fleet design, it does run, it's a bit more reliant on, say, a flagship skill than just basic swarm, and swarm is relatively easy to set up. I personally think, yeah, it needs a couple of key ships, but it's far less intensive on the tech points than the super heavy. Other than that, obviously you've got some different situations where you might have siege fleets, like fast response fleets, all those kind of fleets and stuff like that. They're not the main sort of combat fleets, so I generally only talking about like the super heavy, and I'll only sort of be discussing these within like swarm as well. So to kick things off, we have the AC-721 optimized reload that shortens the weapon cooldown of AC-721 destroyers in the fleet by 10% at base in the first 2 rounds of attack. The requirement is, I think you need 3 AC-721s as well in fleet at a minimum for this to trigger. It's generally gonna just go straight into D. It's not that it's bad, it's just that the AC-721s aren't particularly good. If you're a new player, you could definitely make use of this. You get the AC-721 for free. But definitely later on, you'll be dropping AC-721s out of anything but mining fleets. And even then, I'm not even entirely sure they go into mining fleets at the moment, because now you can put mining ships in your mining fleets. Who'd have thought that would be a thing? So, yeah. It's not particularly great. First 2 rounds of attack. That doesn't increase either the 2 rounds of attack. It only increases the weapon cooldown. And it's only 10%, and I think it goes up to like 15 or 20% or something like that. It's just not a very good flagship. Again, new player, you could probably make use of this because you won't have options to run swarm or super heavy or anything else really. So it might be in D, but like I said, new players can make use of it. Next up, we have the Anti-Aircraft Network 1. When the aircraft or fleets that meet the requirement are at a disadvantage, anti-air weapons will attack aircraft first, increasing the hit rate by 1 plus 4%. That 4% increases, it goes up to, I think it's 13% at max. It's a very, very, very strong flagship skill here. You won't see it quite as much in swarm, and that's because swarm is very, very heavy on just the sheer amount of aircraft you're taking. You'll be taking 120 aircraft into a battle with you, so this won't necessarily trigger off the bat. It can, however, trigger a little bit later on, If like you lose way more aircraft than the other guy and he's got 120 aircraft and it's two swarms fighting each other, it will trigger a bit later on, but by that point you've probably lost that air fight anyway, so it's not one that you really generally want to see in Swarm, which is, you might have it anyway just due to the fact that you bring Winged Hussars, and this is on the Winged Hussar, into Swarm fleets now because they give the hit rate boost. So yeah, you probably will see it in Swarm. It's very, very, very good in Super Heavy fleets, though. I can confirm that. I run this in my Super Heavy fleet. I have a front line of destroyers to sort of back up my SD-59, carriers on the Reinforce. So I'm actually only running around 80... It's around 84 aircraft, I think, in total in the fleet design that I currently run. And... yeah, this is like a requirement at that point, because if I do run into a swarm fleet at 120 aircraft, if I've not got that up and going, my aircraft will get decimated far quicker. I'm 40 aircraft down at that point anyway. But this evens the odds out, and it allows me to absolutely and utterly ruin a swarm fleet's aircraft, and that means their entire damage potential. And they have to sit there and either run away at that point or take an absolute beating, because I run ships that aren't, required to just be carrying fighters and bombers. I've got ships with actual guns on them. So the anti-aircraft network, I think it's probably... And the ease of use and the ease of putting it into fleet, like I said, it's on the Winged Hussar. You need 3 Winged Hussars to get it to trigger. You put it into the Super Heavy fleet, and it completely, it doesn't nuke a Swarm fleet, but it's probably the best in slot at that point. We then have the Anti-Aircraft Network 2, taking advantage of Anti-Aircraft UAV's positioning support system to coordinate the projectile anti-aircraft weaponry of ships in the mid-row, extending the anti-aircraft range to the same row. What this basically does is make that any mid-row ship has anti-aircraft on the same row. Now, my problem with this is it's on the cone, the light cone, the anti-aircraft variant, and it in itself isn't amazing. Like, the Winged Hussar's anti-aircraft DPM outdoes the cruiser's anti-aircraft DPM, and it's not even like a CP versus CP. I'm not thinking, well, light cone's 20 CP, that means it's 3 Winged Hussars versus a light clone. It's like one light cone can, one Winged Hussar will out DPM anti-air wise a light cone, which is kind of awkward because you sat there going, but it's got more missiles, it's a cruiser for one, it should be doing better, but unfortunately it's not. Genuinely, in my opinion, it needs a buff. And as to this strategy, it's kind of awkward because it's, in some situations, really useful and really good. If you're running solar whale carriers, that kind of thing, that means you're getting mid-row protection for solar whales and stuff like that. And that means if you come into contact with a swarm fleet, which are usually quite heavy on the anti-carrier side of things, you're just going to decimate anything trying to bomb your solar whales. It's fantastic. In use, a lot of mid-row ships that you want to run for anti-air have row-wide ability anyway. And if they don't, you're buffing ships to give them row-wide ability that don't have particularly good anti-air capabilities anyway. So it's just not, in my opinion, it just doesn't function properly. If this was fleet-wide or something of that nature, I'd consider running it. But because it is mid-row only, and like I mentioned, if I want mid-row defense, I bring in Mertes or I bring in Ruby Ions. I don't want to spend 20 CP to bring this in on a light cone. So, unfortunately, I'm going to put it in B. It can work to an extent, but I don't think it's particularly good. And I actually, I think the basic anti-aircraft network 1 is better in almost all situations even. Cautious warning. Increase the FOV of qualified fleets by 10 plus 5, but all commands will cost 50% more action points. I actually really like this. It's on the base Eris. It gives you similar sort of view radius as if you'd put a mining platform down. And some people will do this. I used to do it until I got hold of Eris's with this on it. I would place basic mining platforms away from my base to extend my view range out to, well, help a little bit trying to find any fleets trying to come after my base or come after my amps and that kind of thing. Gives me a quicker reaction time to them, or a longer duration of reaction time to deal with them. Gives view range for your entire union. It's really, really good. So this makes it even easier because now you've got the ability to move your field of view, costing very little as well. Okay, the 50% more action points hurt a little bit, but it really doesn't matter. You're normally moving these Erises into one Eris over here, in position, done. He's there for the rest of the game unless he gets blown up. This also gives you a warp point. Cautious warning, A tier. It's highly, highly useful information and the ability to foresee an incoming attack against anything, your base, maybe you're set up within like a big group of you, hiving up. Giving yourselves that early warning system's fantastic, and it works. Why not? And the Eris is a fast ship. It moves at pretty decent speed, so you can get it out there pretty quickly. And they're cheap. You only have to put points into this. You don't care about the armor or anything. Maybe put points into its movement speed. There you go. Easy. We next up have combat insertion. When the fleet is not the enemy's main target in a combat situation, it can prioritize attack on 4-to-1 targets with a lower HP. I actually ran this quite a bit as soon as the the flagship skills came in. It works, it does function, but the fleet to be able to do it is kind of awkward because this ability itself's on the HC Carillion, and I believe it's also on the HC Jaeger. And okay, the Carillions you can definitely get into fleet quite quickly, but the problem is that means you need to try and put damage ships within that fleet, and when I'm running super heavy, I've got a lot of the main damage dealers in the main fleet at that point. So unless we get the ability to, or I'm missing some big damage sort of ships as well there. Unless I can get hold of that, I can't see that much use for it. But generally, forcing and finishing off a ship, really damn useful. If you have a swarm main fleet, prioritizing carriers, you have a really big heavy DPM fleet on the right hand side, so your swarm goes in first, starts hitting those carriers, it brings their health down. You hit with your high DPM fleet, you can knock those carriers out really damn quickly with this, and in that situation it's really damn strong. Problem is, it does mean you need to outnumber your opponent at any given point, which is difficult to do. Most of the time when people are taking a battle to you, it's him and his 5 mates, or it's him and his 5 ults, or him and his other fleet, and at that point he's gonna, run one fleet into one of your fleets, probably run the other fleet into your other fleet, or try and just burn down one of your single fleets. And if it catches the fleet that this has, this strategy is in, it's useless at that point. So it's very situational. Do you know what? I'm going to move Anti-Aircraft Network 2 down to C, and I'm going to put Combat Insertion into B. I think that makes more sense to me. Because Combat Insertion, it is really good if you can get it to work and pull it off. But it is situational, whereas Anti-Aircraft Network 2 is, like, generally not that good and really difficult to get going. Combat Surge. When a fleet engage in combat, they tackle the enemy by approaching them, increasing the time required for both parties' fleets to retreat by 45 seconds. I believe this goes up to 90 seconds. The whales are a big fan of this one. It is on the spear, and like, well, as I mentioned, to run a spear, you need a pretty solid amount of tech points. You don't really see that many players with them. But locking down your opponent when you know you're going to win for 1 minute and 30 seconds can deal absolutely devastating damage to him. There is catch-22. You might run into a guy who's better than you are, and you've just locked yourself in to a battle for 90 seconds. I say 90, but that's what this upgrades to. So yeah, kind of like a bit of a double-edged sword, but generally speaking, you're only seeing it in situations where you think you're probably going to win, and it's not bad. I mean, killing enemy ships is actually like quite an underrated thing to do, and this is why people run away all the time. You might kill everybody's aircraft in a swarm fleet and they just run away because they don't want to lose their carriers. They might take too much damage. They might lose one carrier and then the second carrier is dropping down to no health, so they run away. This stops that, and this forces the combat engagement, therefore allowing you to get more of those juicy carrier kills, and people will hate you for it. Therefore, it's actually quite good. Is it as good as combat insertion? It's probably more usable than combat insertion. I wouldn't class it as A tier, or would I? Back of A tier? I am going to put it back of A tier because I actually think it is quite strong. Being able to force that, well, killing everything is pretty good. Combat Surge. We then have, I got Desperate Measures 2. While in combat, the enemy fleet command points is 80% higher than you prioritize attack on 2 targets with the lowest HP. This drops down to 50% command points at its max rank. It's on the ST59. I have made fantastic use of this in the past, and I will probably continue to do so. Forcing targets, your entire fleet to target 2 targets is devastating for some builds. Like I said, if you can, like, you force, like, the carrier HP down a little bit, and then all of a sudden your entire fleet's like, that carrier right there is just gonna die. There's nothing they can do about it except run away. And that puts you in a good situation. You either push an entire fleet off the front line, or you're killing their carriers. And I've had situations where, because of this ability, you run multiple little small fleets and you all just run them into the one carrier, into the one fleet, and it works really well. The biggest problem is it becomes very AP intensive. Now, we have recently had an action point increase, so it might actually be okay. And now with the equipment, we can actually get even more action points, including generation I've seen recently. So definitely a possibility that Desperate Measures 2 you might see more use of now, and definitely in the future, because of the ability to regain your AP, so you can run those little small fleets, so you're always at that 50% below command point limit. And it's not hard to do. Most people are running around with like a 500 CP fleet for most players. Or if they know what they're doing, they're running around with around 700. So you really only need to run like a 250 or 300, 350 CP fleet. And that's fairly decent. And you can run that 3 times, like, quite easily. So there you go. Desperate Measures 2, actually pretty decent. So let's stick that. Where am I going to put this one? Desperate Measures. The top of B. It's kind of works similar to combat insertion, I guess, but it's more reliable. You can definitely force it. Yeah, I think that's right. We'll put it in B. Top of B. Fast switching. Okay. We are on to, I believe this is on the Tranquility. Cooldown of all anti-aircraft weapons in our company's ships is reduced by 3%. Flight time, the cooldown of anti-aircraft weapons of our company's aircraft are reduced by 3%. And I believe because this is on the MultiTarget, it's for all Jupiter industry ships. Now, what's the issue with that? Well, it's very difficult to run a single company like fleet. A lot of the ships aren't particularly good, with the exception of Antonius having like somewhat more better ships than most of the others. In Jupiter's case, you have to run things like Eternal Storms and that sort of stuff, which are pretty good. But then you've got some really bad choices that you're going to have to make to try and fill up a fleet to make this actually function. And it doesn't give anywhere near enough of a buff. The buff is just too small for it to really make any sense, in my opinion. This is the same for the Antonius version of this as well, which we'll get onto shortly. So fast switching, I'm actually going to put it behind the Anti-Aircraft Network too. I think you can actually make more use of that than you can fast switching. Firing calibration, the anti-aircraft weapons or company ships or aircraft have a 5% chance to deal 80% additional damage to target hit. This is the Antonius one. It can get use. You will see it. It's on the wing to start anyway, so it does sort of come into play. And then, you know, you can go up to 10% chance to deal 160% damage on the likes of, your wing to SARs themselves will be doing a 10% chance to deal 160% damage, which is quite nice. But Mistrals and all sorts of the Antonius aircraft also get a buff from this. So it works. It does its job. I guess it's better than fast switching. And the only reason it's better than fast switching is because the Antonius craft are just better. Currently, anyway. Never know, might get some buffs and a bit more balancing happening. Increase the hit rate to the KCCPV 2.0 cruisers in the fleet during the first 2 firing rounds of 5%. That's the target guidance. I'm going to stick that back down in D as well straight away. It's just not that good. KCPVs, the damage output's terrible at the end of the day in comparison to other cruisers for certain. Okay, they cost a little less than other cruisers to run, but like even you could run a CAS and your CAS will do more damage than your KCCPV and it's only get a 5% increase, and it's never going to beat the CAS, and they're 2 base ships that you get for free. So yeah, it's just not going to work. I think the AC-721 is even more used than KCCPVs. So it's a bit of a shame. Although saying that, it's an ugly ship and I'd rather not see him anyway. Multi-target counter-attack. This is on the Thunderbolt. When multiple fleets attack the fleet simultaneously, it launches a counter-attack against 2 sub-target fleets with a counter-attack efficiency of 20%. That means you'll do 20% damage to the second fleet. I believe it goes up to 60% at max. There's also another version of this, which is on equipment, and it does a similar sort of thing. It is good. The problem with it being on the Thunderbolt is the Thunderbolt is very, very squidgy. And once that gets attacked, the Thunderbolts normally die very, very rapidly, and this kind of like stops working at that point. However, I can see, you know, the ability for it to be very strong in the future. This is something I've not been able to test myself very much because I have got the Thunderbolt, but I don't have much tech points into it. I don't have any other modules for it. So I'm running like a really bog standard Thunderbolt to like test this. And I don't think that is an ideal situation. You want to see, you know, a 300 tech point, 400 tech point Thunderbolt with all the modules on that are doing, you know, set up correctly. I've seen some crazy Thunderbolt builds where they're doing absurd damage or like an insane amount of sort of not anti-aircraft or anti-small damage as well, or anti-large. But they also have this ability to just shoot all the missiles out the sky, which is kind of funny if you come against people that are spamming Callisto type Bs out and now they got no damage coming off them. So it's got potential, and like I said, because I haven't really played with it, I feel a little bit bad for putting this into B. It's not going to be better than combat. It would be better, I think, than combat insertion and potentially desperate measures. But I'd need to be able to test it better. And unfortunately, I don't have the tech points, like I said, in the Thunderbolt to really give it a true justice, as it were. Because you could... If a new player runs into a Thunderbolt whale, with all of his fleets, he's going to lose all of his fleets because of this ability in less time than it would have took for one fleet. And that's going to save a lot of damage on your fleet. There might be a new player, but you're still going to take a beating against multiple fleets. So yeah, its potential is there. Unfortunately, unable to test properly. We have patrolling defense. When a fleet guards a resource node, it can also guard other resource nodes within the operation area. Guards up to 2 additional resource nodes. It's not very good. You just used a blockade instead. It's going in D. It's probably better than the KCPV's target guidance. There is an exception where if you're using this on the internal storm, you can have an invisible fleet doing it, which is kind of funny. And it does lead to some interesting situations where someone's like, well, I'm going to go blow up your mining fleet with V2As and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, these eternal storms appear out of nowhere and just trash his fleet. So there is an exception where this can work, and it is kind of funny when it does, but it is very, very gimmicky, in my opinion, that with the Eternal Storm. And once it happens there's a good chance that player is never going to fall for that again, and then the patrolling defense becomes redundant anyway. Generally, it's redundant because, like I said, you can drop a mining platform down, you can blockade the mining platform, and it gives you the sort of the same ability as guarding these nodes. Sailing speed coordination. Qualified fleets will maintain a sailing speed and warp speed at 80% of all ships' average speed. This is on the FSV. The auxiliary ship, it's useless. It's relatively useless. That's unfair, to be fair to it, but it only works if you have only auxiliary ships and frigates in fleet. That does mean you can get very, very, very fast auxiliary ships. At the same time, it's kind of useless because auxiliary ships are kind of useless, and a fleet of just frigates is generally pretty useless as well. The exception is a siege fleet, where you can run Noma, the toilet. I think that's got a siege variant as well, I'm pretty certain. And a couple of maybe healers or something of that nature. And then you got, a pretty quick fleet that can reinforce itself out in, space somewhere while it's blowing up outposts and amps and that kind of thing. So it has got probably a bit more use than patrolling defense, but it's not particularly great. Siege tactic 2. If your fleet command point is greater than that of the opponent before entering combat engagement, then the fleet cannot retreat within the first 30 seconds of the engagement. This doesn't lock your fleet, this only locks your enemy. I believe it goes to 40 seconds, somewhere around there. And 40 seconds of them not being able to run away. Generally speaking, you're not going to get much done in 40 seconds. So it's inferior, in my opinion, to Combat Surge. It's safer than Combat Surge, though, but you're generally not going to see it trigger too much, unfortunately. Strategic strikes 1, 2, and 3 up next. 1 is a 90-degree cone out in front. 2 is a 180-degree cone out in front. And 3 is a big 360, and you can make that bigger as well. Generally speaking, I think 1 and 3 are the most useful. 1, you can sort of use a strategic strike to snipe at something rather than cover an entire area. This can be quite useful if you want to pin down a certain fleet. Maybe there's a specific enemy that's maybe you got 10 fleets coming towards you. One of those guys is a whale, so you want to try and keep him out the fight a little bit. You can strategic strike him, keep him locked in a position, and you're going to lose all your aircraft regardless. If you use a strategic strike anyway, you're going to lose all your aircraft regardless. And someone in the comments is going to be like, no, it's really good. Yeah, stop killing pirates, go do PvP. You're going to lose all your craft in a strategic strike. End of story. That's how it's going to work. That's why I don't rate them. That's why I've stopped using them, with the exception of killing pirates, because it's a great way to get experience on your aircraft. But anyway, strategic strike 1, pinpoint that whale that's coming towards you, so you can hold him there for a little bit longer, and then you can like try and trounce the rest of the fleets coming at you, and then, you know, deal with the whale a little bit later on. That's a possibility. Things like that, I think, make the strategic strike 1 more viable than 2. I'm going to put it at the back of B. Strategic strike 2, you can kind of do the same thing, but it's a 180, so it's a bit more difficult to pull off. I'm going to put it in C. Strategic strike 3, I'm going to put it just behind strategic strike 1. The only real use I've seen for strategic strike 3 at the moment is, you know, when you have your enemy and you've hived up, and then they send like 100 scouts at you, and your entire network, well, your entire hive is just covered in scouts. Strategic strike 3, just kill them all. Cost you whatever it is. Is it 30 points or something like that? AP? I can't remember now. It's been ages since I used strategic strike. Wipe all those out, and you're good. There is an exception to strategic strike, and this is going to be another one someone's going to comment down below, and it doesn't. Okay, great. If you have multiple ults, you can put multiple of the overpowered ships into your strategic strike, and that does make it actually quite good, but generally speaking, not every player's got that capability. So I am not going to talk about that, really. So yeah, that's it. S tier, there's only one, oddly. I was expecting more. What was I thinking? Yeah, probably cautious warnings. Which might even go into S tier. It situationally is probably more useful than Anti-Aircraft Network 1. If you can get like the early warning system going, it really screws up with your enemy, because you can just force like engagements as they approach you, and you can like full on stop an assault doing that if they're not timing their fleets properly. And cautious warning allows you to do that, so definitely check that one out. But yeah, there you go. So that is a quick little tier list. I say quick, I have no idea how long this has been recording for. 30 minutes, great. It's not quick at all. Hope you enjoy. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.